Okay, hopefully you'll finish this today, the lecture that won't die because I'm long-winded. So we finished on Wednesday talking about what VO2 max is. Okay, we've been talking about aerobic metabolism, how we measure aerobic metabolism, right? That we're measuring oxygen use and we're using that to estimate what's happening in Krebs and the electron transport chain. Okay, we were talking that we express max VO2, or we can express it in what you guys are doing now in either an absolute sense, so liters of oxygen, a volume per minute, okay, or, and the way that's more commonly done is we express it relative to your body weight, okay, which allows us to make comparisons among people that are different sizes. It lets us compare men and women a little bit more accurately, mostly because of differences in body size and body composition. And it lets us compare old and young, trained and untrained. We need to do those things because there are lots of both sort of anatomical and physiological characteristics of people that will affect your VO2 max. Okay, some of it is genetic. Some of it responds to training. A lot of it is related to body composition and body size. Okay, so sex tends to matter mostly because men and women tend to have different body compositions ever so slightly, and men tend to be larger than women on average, not in every instance, but on average. Okay, body size matters. Age matters. We'll get more into that when we do cardiovascular stuff. Me being, we'll talk about it. I'm gonna have a moment here, right? Me being probably 25 years older than most of y'all, which I still have a hard time with. I will have a lower max heart rate, and therefore that should, all other things being equal, allow you guys to have a higher, we would imagine you guys would have a higher VO2 max than I would, simply because I have a lower max cardiac output. Okay, levels of aerobic training really matter because mitochondria, where we use the oxygen, respond to training. Also, training makes your left ventricle and you get cardiac hypertrophy, you get left ventricular hypertrophy, stroke volume goes up, therefore max cardiac output can go up. If you're better trained, you have more capillaries, so you can get more blood to the muscles where you need them in those ways. So there's several things. VO2 max very heavily responds to aerobic training, but it's kind of like resistance training. In most people is the next step. Some of y'all can train all day, you're never going to get more fit aerobically. I'm sorry. Okay. Some of you are very aerobically fit and you've never done anything. You're sedentary. Okay. Thank your mom. You've got good genes. Okay. About 40% of VO2 max in your response to training is due to genetics. Not quite as much as with resistance training, but it's pretty much out there. Okay. So muscle mass, heart size, blood volume, number of mitochondria in muscle, all of these things play a role. And this is why expressing it relative to body weight is a thing that we want to do. Okay. So we'll do it this way. Okay. I will always be somewhat self-deprecating of myself. Here's Dr. Black as a junior in high school. It's pretty close. Okay. Junior in high school now. Okay. Those weights are pretty darn close. In the midst of all of these things. All right. This is going to illustrate why expressing it to body weight or to body size in some ways actually matters. Okay. These two individuals, young Dr. Black, wet behind the ears, knows nothing about the world, and then old grizzled Dr. Black now, same muscle mass. Okay. Same muscle mass. Completely not true, but the way I've drawn it, the same muscle mass. But when you weigh 150 pounds, you have VO2 max based upon your muscle mass of, let's say, 3 liters per minute. Same 3 liters per minute. Okay, but when we normalize it to body weight, it's either 44 or it's 33. It matters because of this. Okay, We need to express the body size to figure out how truly trained you are, because in most instances, when I walk around, I have to carry my body weight. Okay? I have a certain amount of muscle, I have a certain capacity to use oxygen, and that's great, but it has to be relative to the amount of force and energy I need to carry myself around. Okay? And so during what we call no, it's not body weight, non-body weight supported exercise, walking, running, things of that nature. This is how we want to express it. It's a little different if you cycle, because you're sitting on the seat, you don't have to carry your body weight around. Cycling is more related to muscle mass and some other kinds of things, but that's it. For yourself, imagine you are going to go and jog right now, okay? Then you're going to come back and I'm going to give you a backpack that weighs 50 pounds. And now you got to go run with that 50 pounds. Can you run as far? Are you going to get fatigued faster and those kinds of things? That is in essence what this is, okay? I am carrying around 50 extra pounds I basically am walking around with a fat backpack on, okay? Compared to where I was when I was 16, which is hilarious. In those ways. I am the American statistics in those ways. Right. You guys all learned in those ways. All right. That's why this matters. That's why it matters that we express it relative to body size. Okay. Similarly, when we do exercise testing in individuals, I think this is an important point to make. Okay. Here we have the same person, the same body composition. Everything is basically the same, and they are running. It's you when you're unfit, and it's you when you're more fit. But note how early on, when we're doing less work, that the lines are basically even with each other, and then you just stop. And if you're more fit, you just get to keep going. Okay. One of the things to remember, and this is about, again, biochemistry and the way the metabolic systems work, is to be more trained. People simply have a larger capacity to generate oxygen. You are not more efficient, right? You're not like you're in a hybrid car versus being in a big dually truck or anything. The metabolism works basically the same in everybody relative to your body size. It's just that when you're more fit, you have a greater capacity to make oxygen. Okay. So this is a really important thing to kind of keep in mind. Okay. Is that as you become more and more fit, it just lets you go up here. Okay. It doesn't change the slopes, it doesn't change kind of what all is happening. And that's going to be really important because as you become more fit, when you do submaximal activities, the amount of oxygen it costs you to do those activities doesn't change, right? Fit or unfit, you walking up the stairs costs the same amount of oxygen if you weigh the same, okay? It's just that when you are more fit, you can do more stairs. You could do the stairs faster and be able to cover things. All right, a little bit of kind of info that I know you guys have seen, but I think it's fun to talk about. These are normal ranges in college age men and women. And I will put a caveat on this in that we don't exactly have as much up-to-date data as we used to on these normative values. Okay. And we are less fit as a society from when a lot of these norms and things were done in the 60s and the 70s. And part of why we're less fit is because body composition has changed a little bit. Okay. General values for average college age men is sort of mid 40s. Okay, maybe up to about 50. Ladies, y'all are right around 40. This entire difference in general is driven by body composition differences. Okay. Ladies, you all tend to have slightly higher body fat percentages on average than men, which means you have a larger percentage of your weight that is not metabolically active. Therefore, you can't use that to generate force, and therefore your fitness levels are going to be a little bit low. Okay. In elite distance runners, we're going to see men easily get into the mid to high 70s, into the 80s, maybe even up into the 90s. In women, we're going to see mid to high 60s into the low 70s. okay? Highest ever recorded, this number is not right now, it's actually not 94 anymore, it's like 97. In a guy who's a professional cyclist, who's not a very good cyclist, which is hilarious to me. He's got this giant VO2 max and he like has never won an event. He rarely like finishes even in like the top 10 on a bunch of things. So we just discount the usefulness of this as a predictor of actual performance. Women, it tends to be about 77, kind of the high 70s. On average, highest values actually tend to be in cross-country skiers. Anybody ever been cross-country skiing? No? Audrey, is it fun? Is it hard?
No.
It's not hard?
I mean, I think it's a lot easier than,
Regular skiing?
yeah.
Not from a like how difficult, but like can you?
Oh, yeah.
So when you cross-country ski, you use your legs and you use your arms a
Yeah.
bunch. VO2 max is dependent upon engaged muscle mass during exercise. And so people that cross-country ski, they make these like treadmills that are basically you can cross-country ski your way up the treadmill. And because you're using your arms and your legs, we get a little bit higher values. Okay. Next year, when they do the Winter Olympics again, look at the men and women that are cross-country skiers. Okay. They are ginormous human beings, right? These are like dudes that if they were Americans would play tight end or something in football. But they're from, Norway and Sweden and they're 6'4" and they weigh 235 and they're like 4% body fat and just giant human beings. Okay. And that's part of why they have such high VO2 max. Okay. The type of exercise we use to test matters when we do your VO2 max. Okay. Depending upon who you talk to, they will yell at you and say, you should never call a test that was not running on a treadmill a VO2 max, okay? If you do it on the bike, it's not a max, it's a peak, okay? If you do arm crank, it's not a max, it's a peak, okay? And so you've got to be careful because the mode or type of exercise alters your value. For most of you, if you're not a trained cyclist, your on the bike VO2 peak value will be 5 to 10% less than what we could get if we put you on the treadmill. Because you don't use your arms as much. When you're running, you're swinging. The reason it tends to be a little higher when you cross country ski is you're actually generating force and propulsion. Okay. Anything that is not running, we call it a VO2 peak. Now, you remember the other day I asked you guys how we know if you've done a max test. You guys gave me some things which we're going to talk about. The single best way to know that you've done a max, okay, is you are on a treadmill, right? You're doing these step increases in work rate, okay? And your VO2 is going to go up like so, and we get to a place where we step up the work that you're doing, but your VO2 levels off, okay? You are doing more work. You're running faster. You're running up a steeper incline, and yet your VO2 has not gone up. Okay. How can you do this? If VO2 can't go up and we've reached max, how can you do more work? How can you run faster or up a steeper incline? They're just not proportional. They are absolutely proportional. But think about metabolism. Think about metabolism. To do more work, I need more ATP. Where might I get extra ATP? Anaerobic metabolism. Okay? Anaerobic metabolism. So to do this, right, this extra work is primarily at that point coming from glycolysis. Okay? There are people who are very fussy. Okay? As scientists, we're often very fussy. That will say, unless you see this, work rate goes up, VO2 does not go up anymore, That is the only true way to say that you've reached a VO2 max. Okay. I've done, I don't know, 300 or 400 VO2 max tests or peak tests on the bike and the treadmill and things in the almost 25 years that I've been an exercise physiologist. I've seen people reach a plateau, I don't know, 15 times, 20 times. Okay. It doesn't happen very often because the time you get to here, you're about to fucking black out. If you do it right, you can't go anymore. Like, I'm done. Anybody in here done a VO2 max test? Anybody? Aaron? Did you do the, like a true, like go all the way to max? In a study with the mask on and everything? Yeah? Okay. What did you feel like when you stopped? Death, right? You're done. So you get to here and there's lots and lots of fatigue. So we cheat this. We either say, okay, well, it's a peak, it doesn't matter. Or, and here's the really terrible thing that we've started doing. You do this and it comes up and you stop and you don't get a plateau. So we say, all right, fine. You get to sit around and rest for 30 minutes. And then we're going to go again and we're going to start you up here. And see if we make you work harder. Can we force your VO2 to be high or not? It's called a validation protocol, and it's awful. It's so bad on all of those things. So there are people, though, that will say, unless you see an increase in work rate without a corresponding increase in VO2 or energy expenditure, it's not truly a max. So if anyone ever asks you, like, hey, did you do a max test? You'd be like, I don't know, call it a VO2 peak, and everybody will be fine and happy, and nobody will be fussy and yell at you in the midst of all of that, okay? That's what we're doing, okay? And the reason that we know with that plateau, when work rate goes up and VO2 doesn't, that that's it, is because that's telling us you cannot get any more energy. We're measuring it much more directly. Everything else that we could potentially use to judge if you gave a very strong effort, if you were very close to your max, you can cheat all of it, okay? You can cheat all of it. Max heart rate, if you're really fit, you actually won't probably reach 95% of age predicted max heart rate. I go jog and I'm over my age predicted max heart rate. I should probably go see a cardiologist about that. Okay. I was jogging last week at like 10 minute per mile pace, which feels really slow for me. And my heart rate was like 175. It should not be 175. Okay. It's possible that my Apple Watch is broken and not correct, but I have a weird cardiovascular response. If you're like, hey, what was your RPE? Aaron goes there and there's probably like 19 or 20, but you can be like, no, I'm way down here. I'm done. It's 20. I can slide. Okay. So this is some of the nuance that goes into all of these different things. Okay. These are some actual data from a study that we did about 15 years ago, where we had people ride the bike like so. Then we flipped the bike over and we had people do arm crank, which is showing the effects of muscle mass engaged during exercise, right? And so here is VO2 peak and here is max heart rate. Green is arm crank, red is legs. Basically, when you do arm crank, you get about 75% of what you do when you ride the bike the other way. You can see you don't reach the same max heart rate in those ways, and so you've gotta be careful about all of it. Okay? So these are the different ways and kind of different effects of modes of exercise on everything. All right. So if you do a max test, there are sets of criteria beyond we see a plateau in VO2 and work rate goes up to say this was a good test. This was a real max effort or a real peak test if it's on the bike or something. The two sort of best things for us to measure are things that measure actual metabolic processes going on. Okay. One of those is we reach a blood lactate level of 8 millimole. Okay. You're biking, we do a little finger stick on you, put it in the thing, we say, okay, your blood lactate is this. 8 millimole is about 4 times higher than normal resting blood lactate levels. Okay. So if it's at 8 millimole, what should that tell us about how much glycolysis you were performing? when this is way high, right? A lot. Why would a lot of glycolysis be an indication that we're very, very near maxing out aerobic metabolic processes, that we're maxing out the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain? To get the lactate, what has to happen to the pyruvate or not happen to the pyruvate that we're making?
It gets stacked up and doesn't go to the Krebs cycle.
Very good. It gets stacked up. Okay. So you're making a huge amount of pyruvate, and you've essentially gotten very close to maxing out how much of that pyruvate can go into Krebs. And so then it's going to start going more and more to glycolysis. So that's why this is a really good indicator. Okay. We have seen values during max test of 17, 18, 21, I think is about the highest that I've ever seen. Okay. In people, really, really high levels of blood lactate. RER greater than 1.1. Remember, we talked about RER on Wednesday. This is the ratio of CO2 to oxygen consumption. Okay. How on earth can it get over 1? We haven't actually, that I think about it now, we haven't actually talked about that. So when you guys get acidity in your blood, do you guys know that you have Tums that floats around in your blood? You guys heard of? So the primary ingredient in like Tums or things when you have an upset stomach is bicarbonate. Okay, you take it and it's sodium bicarbonate. It's a salt, so that you get it that way. But it dissociates, you get sodium bicarbonate. The bicarbonate neutralizes the acid. Okay, it's a base, it buffers the acid, and it makes carbon dioxide. And so you have in your blood right now bicarbonate, it just floats around. So when you make lactic acid and that acidity escapes out of the cells into the blood, it gets buffered by that bicarbonate. And what happens then is as it buffers it, it turns the bicarbonate into CO2. And then you breathe that CO2 out. So you have carbon dioxide that's coming out of your lungs that did not come from the Krebs cycle. And that's why we're able to get it to be over 1.1. So again, this is an indicator that we've got lots of anaerobic metabolism or loss of glycolysis because we're having to buffer. Okay. 90% of age predicted max heart rate is in some ways a useless thing because we don't know what our norms are. We have to figure out what that would look like on a whole bunch of things for you guys. RPE of 19 or 20 on the 6 to 20 scale, and then reaching, usually now it's 95% of age predicted max heart rate. Okay. So if we do some easy math, you guys are all about 20, then your age predicted max heart rate would be 200. So we'd like to see all of you guys get to a max heart rate of about 190 or thereabouts. Okay. We do those things. Again, the heart rate means we're maxing out cardiac output. And so that's one of our predictors that as cardiac output plateaus, so we're going to also plateau VO2. That's kind of how we get these things. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about fatigue. The quick run through fatigue. If you're interested in this, then I would say you guys will get a little bit more of this in some of the elective classes and things, or come be a grad student. I've taught a PhD class just on fatigue. But when I say fatigue, what we mean is not tired. We don't mean sleepy, which many of you guys are right now. Okay. All right. What did we do last night, buddy? Okay. Should have come with Leslie and Ellis and I and gone to a Halloween party at the Harn Homestead in Oklahoma City so you could trick or treat and do a bunch of things. They get her face painted. Who gives a shit about trick or treating? She just got her face painted. She loves face painting like more than anything in the world. And so we got our face painted, and then we got some candy. So she was really wound up on all of that. But fatigue is not tiredness. Okay. Fatigue in a lot of ways is going to look at like a decrease in physical or mental performance. Fatigue is a failure to be able to produce force. Okay. You are motivated, you are trying to generate force at your muscles, and you cannot do it to the same level that you used to be able. Okay. So imagine if I make all of you do squats right now. You can do squats, and we're going to do squats until failure, right? I can do them, I can do them, I can do them. At some point, I cannot do one more squat. Okay. You cannot generate force to do a movement that you used to be able to do. That's fatigue. And that's fatigue. Fatigue, and when I say weakness, this is physiological weakness. This is not some sort of weird fight me bro on Twitter or something. Weakness denotes specifically a failure of initial force production. Okay. Today I can pick up 500 pounds. Tomorrow I can only pick up 400 pounds. That's considered weakness in that way. I am weaker. My max capacity to generate force is less than what it was. Fatigue is basically I can start where I want to, but now I can't do it anymore. And let me rest right there. Injury is also different. When you get muscle damage or muscle injury, you obliterate sarcomeres. Every time you're sore, you have muscle damage. That's an inflammatory response to damage of the sarcomeres. When you lose sarcomeres, you can't generate as much force because you don't physically have as many cross bridges that you can form. So fatigue is a little bit different than all of that. Okay. We tend to break fatigue down into two kind of particular origins or buckets. One is called peripheral, the other is called central. I promise you, looking out at you guys, many of you are experiencing central fatigue right now. Okay. Central fatigue is motivation. It's brain basically down to the motor neurons in the spinal cord. It is a lack or a reduced ability of the motor cortex to send out signals, or for you to be willing to send those signals anymore. Okay. Peripheral fatigue is a failure in the axon at the neuromuscular junction, right, of excitation, contraction, coupling, of cross bridge formation. It's something, for the most part, in the muscle itself. We've disrupted ionic gradients. We don't have enough ATP, something of that nature. Okay. Central fatigue, there are people that argue that the vast majority of lack of physical performance that people experience during exercise in their everyday lives is central. Think about the last time you worked out. Okay. Think about it. Okay. Who did resistance training yesterday? Okay. Perfect. Grace, can I pick on you and ask a question? Did you go to failure on every set yesterday? Okay. You chose to stop. Yes. Central fatigue. Okay. I don't like this. This is uncomfortable. I think I've done enough. If you could do another rep, but you chose not to, that's central fatigue. Think about the last time you ran or rode a bike or you went to a workout class. Could you have gone another step? Could you have gone ever so slightly faster? If the answer is yes, you stopped because of central fatigue. Okay. You had capacity in the periphery to continue to generate that amount of force, most likely. You chose to stop. Central fatigue is motivation. It's motivation. Okay. So that's a kind of big, interesting thing that we study in my lab. So I've tried to break all of this down. This is from your book. Okay. You've got things in the brain and the spinal cord. This is basically where central fatigue is, and then everything downstream, once we've basically gotten out into the peripheral nerves, into the axons, at the neuromuscular junction, T-tubules, calcium, this is peripheral fatigue. Okay. If you train to failure, you are very likely maybe getting to a place where I cannot release any more calcium, or I've got an impairment in calcium release, so I can't form as many cross bridges, so I can't do one more rep. Okay. So In most types of activities, you get both central and peripheral fatigue occurring simultaneously. Okay? There's some fascinating research that peripheral fatigue actually leads to central fatigue. And there's this sort of interaction, this motor sensory integration stuff that happens. Anybody ever have surgery and had a nerve block rather than them actually putting you under? Landon, you have? Okay. They go here, inject you directly into your spinal cord, or you don't remember? Okay. So there is a thing, it is essentially, ladies, this will be a deal, that you guys may not, hopefully, no, not, but you all may not have had experience with this yet, but you might. It's an epidural. Okay. A nerve block is in essence an epidural. My wife was like, give me the freaking epidural when she was gonna do this. She had no qualms. She was like, natural childbirth, no, give me the drugs. And they gave her the epidural, and at about that time, Ellis decided she had her umbilical cord like under her arm, like this. And about the time they gave the epidural, Ellis went and did one of these numbers. And so her heart rate went crazy, and they were just like, out we go, C-section, on all of those kinds of things. But we give you an epidural, okay? We give you an epidural. You still have motor function, but it blocks the ability of signals from the periphery to get signaled back, those afferent signals in the spinal cord to get transmitted back up. Okay, so why they give women when they're giving birth epidurals. I can give any one of you an epidural. We just inject some fentanyl into your spinal cord, and then I say run or ride a bike. You've never felt so good. Okay, and you go out and you try to pace, but because you can't figure any of the things out about what's happening, you have no perception of the peripheral fatigue components. They give these to people and they just tear ass out on a time trial or something, and then they don't have any way to monitor what's happening, so they basically can't pace themselves, and then they crap out early in that kind of way. So there's this interaction here. Our IRB obviously will not let me inject fentanyl into y'all's spinal cords. A lot of this research is done in medical schools. There's a group at the University of Utah where they do all of this, and make a whole bunch of interesting measures. But it's really fascinating kind of stuff. Okay, so that's part of what is happening. Okay, I listed out for you guys the locations of peripheral fatigue. What I will tell you is that this one here, a failure in the T tubules of excitation and a consequent failure to release calcium out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, is the primary peripheral mechanism of fatigue. That's the primary thing. When you guys do reps to failure, when you get to failure, you've messed up excitation contraction coupling. Okay. The really fascinating thing about fatigue, though, is going to be nope. What do I have here? Is the speed of recovery of these things. Okay. Peripheral fatigue tends to recover faster than central fatigue. Okay. Recovery of ionic gradients in the muscle can usually happen within 30 seconds to a minute or something like that, provided you have a sufficient amount of ATP. Okay. If for some reason we've got hydrogen ions from lactic acid that are floating around, pH will take maybe 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer, for us to buffer and to return pH back to normal levels. Okay. Excitation contraction coupling, there's some weird stuff that happens. It may take hours or days for that to recover. Okay. So if you worked out really hard yesterday, you may have impairments in excitation contraction coupling that last through the weekend. Okay. This is why you can't lift to failure every time that you go to the gym. Okay. Monday we will start the cardiovascular system. Okay. And I'll try to update our schedule and everything between now and then. Figure out what all is happening. Please make sure I have your test. If you want to see your test, come see me.
Couple minutes later,